Welcome to the Unworthy Leader podcast, a show that shatters the illusion of perfect leadership. Here we expose the flaws, doubts, and insecurities behind the titles, proving that true leadership isn't about being worthy. It's about owning your unworthiness and leading anyway. If you're tired of the polished facades, you've come to the right place. You'll hear the raw truth from leaders you admire and trust. I'm Kendra Dahlstrom, your host and executive coach to the Fortune 500 C-suite. Let's get started. Hi, Madeline Blanchard. Welcome to the Unworthy Leader podcast. I am so delighted to have you here today. For those of you that don't know Madeleine, she has been acknowledged as an expert in the coaching space. She works with the Blanchard Leadership Company under Ken Blanchard as the founder of that company, which really pioneered servant leadership, which is how I actually found Ken Blanchard. And I met Madeleine through Chad Gordon, who runs the podcast for the Blanchard Leadership Group. And he recommended that we connect because we both had a keen interest in not only emotional intelligence, but spiritual intelligence. I thought you'd be a great guest to have on this podcast for a variety of reasons. The first is because you are so well respected in this space. You have so much knowledge. You've been coaching for a long time and have not only, been a very great example of personal development and always looking to push and develop yourself. You also have worked with so many clients at varying levels at various different types of companies. I know that this whole concept of imposter syndrome, self-doubt, or a feeling of unworthiness shows up differently for different people is something that you've likely encountered. So thank you for being here.
Delighted to be here. I love these topics, so I could talk about them all day long. So coaching, the technology of coaching, the science of coaching, the art of coaching is really one of the very few things to hold my interest for long enough for kind of to have there's enough incentive there for me to have devoted my adult life to trying to achieve mastery. And it's like it's a wonderful thing because it's like the more you learn and the better you get at it, the more you realize there's so much more to learn. And so it's just really held my interest, which is a feat because I get bored really easily. And I'm also a person who starts things. And I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that until I was in my 40s. But it's like I look for kind of what doesn't exist, and then I go try to make it exist. And that's provided a lot of material for spiritual improvement. Because it's hard, right? I've had some successes, but I've also had some spectacular failures. So when I say failing is a critical part of success and learning and growth, I know what I'm talking about. And I've suffered the slings and arrows of that. What else? I'm kind of a compulsive content creator. Like I love ideas, and I love writing about ideas.
And there's so much in what you said. So
a lot of what I love to do is kind of helping people connect the dots around big concepts. And I have a terrible memory. I've always had a terrible memory. I mean, I was an actor in my first career. Learning and retaining lines was my nemesis. It really was. And I did it, and I got good at it. But it was never natural for me. Singers who remember lyrics, like my ex-husband could, at the drop of a hat, do a Shakespeare sonnet right this minute. Never. I could never do it. Anyway, so that to me is...
Yeah. So if we back up, you had mentioned you've had, to quote you, several failures. And so I'd love to look at that because from my experience, in my own personal story, I've had a lot of feelings of unworthiness. And then I've had like moments of like full blown imposter syndrome. But majority of the time it shows up as self-doubt. So I'd love to know, which of those words, or maybe it's a new word that you resonate with most and how you've experienced it.
Yeah. I've worked with a lot of clients who, who hear this term imposter syndrome and really, that really resonates with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember distinctly the first time I ever heard that term. And it was in relation to a very successful artist in New York City that my now ex-husband was working with, and that she was playwright, songwriter. I mean, you'd recognize the name. And they were chatting, they were all out for drinks after a rehearsal one night, and she used that term. And he came home and he told me about it. And I'm like, wait, what? That's so crazy, because she's a screaming talent, right? And then you find out that Maya Angelou, right, has suffered from this. And I'm like, I get it. I do get it. I've worked with enough people who suffer from it. I personally, don't get me wrong, it's not that I haven't had doubts. I've had tremendous doubts. Like, who do I think I am?
Yeah.
But actually, you know what? I have never thought, who do I think I am? What I have had is plenty of other people who've literally said to me, who do you think you are? What gives you permission to do this? And there's something really weird about my personality is the more I get, what are you talking about? Who are you even? The more I am motivated. So no has been a huge motivator for me.
Fascinating. Well, thank you for sharing that. I don't want you to call it weird because I think it's fascinating. And one of the things I hope to unlock in these podcasts is different strategies that work for different people. And so what I'm hearing for you is that no is a huge motivator for you. And you didn't even, you didn't even have, like, you didn't even allow maybe the essence of self-doubt to even sink into your bones. You just said, it's not an option. I'm going to plow through this and I'm going to do what I want to do. You took the challenge. So I'm hearing that that was part of your strategy.
It would be generous to call it a strategy. When I say weird, I do think there's a strangeness to it. Because, do you remember the Strengths Finder? It still exists, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when the Strengths Finder first came out, I just started a coaching company with Scott Blanchard, who I just met. Actually, a really good friend introduced us. And we started this coaching company. And I bought Now Discover Your Strengths for everyone in the company. It was like 21 copies. And we all took the quiz. And one of my favorite people who I still get to work with had in her top 5, she had woo. I was like, I want woo. I want woo. I don't have woo. Woo was like 23 for me. And in my top 5, I had self-assurance.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, well, I want self-assurance. How do you get that? And I was like, I have no idea. I came with it. I just came with it. If I saw something I wanted to do, it just didn't cross my mind. that I shouldn't do it. Now, that has gotten me into unbelievable amounts of trouble in all kinds of ways. But it's like, I see the thing I want to do, and I would just go do it. And if someone said, "What are you doing? You can't do that. Who gave you permission? Who do you think you are?" I'd be like, "Well, just watch me. I'm doing it. I'm doing it." I have I mean, it's not like I'm special. It was like, it wasn't about me. It was about the thing that I wanted to do.
It's the impact and
Yes.
Yeah.
Result, outcome. That's
Love
what
that.
Yeah.
So how did self-doubt show up for you? Because you mentioned that you've experienced it. So what does it feel like, or how does it show up for you then when you're doing those things?
Yeah, you go running toward the thing, and then you realize, oh, crap, I don't know what I'm doing. Crap, I need XYZ, and I don't have it. What was I thinking? Why did I think I could do this? Inevitably, every single time. So, the wonderful, is it a myth? Is it the story of Icarus?
Mm-hmm.
Is like, I have felt the sun melting my wax wings. I've felt it. Like, maybe wax wasn't such a good idea. Okay. So,
So what's next for you in those moments when that happens?
take a deep breath, lick my wounds, forgive myself, get help, find the right people to help me, get
Tell me
training,
more about that. Like, what does get help look like for you?
find someone who knows what they're doing.
Okay, so resources,
There is someone,
knowledge.
right? Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes, when I wrote the first draft of a book that I wrote with Scott Blanchard, I sent the initial copy. I didn't know how to write. Okay, this was 2001. I really didn't know how to write. And I sent it to a really good friend from college who does know how to write. She went to Yale Business School. She's so smart. And she sent me back my manuscript, and it was bleeding.
Red all over it.
There was not a single paragraph. And it was, what does this mean? What are you trying to say here? Are you sure about this? Please make the case more effectively. I was like, I can't do this. I can't write a book. What was I thinking? But her input, her feedback, her questions made it a really good book. And I learned how to write. And her voice is still in my head. It's like, what does this mean? What are you really trying to say here? Wait a minute. This sentence has 4 ideas in it. Pick one. So just fast out of the gate, wait, hold it, go back to camp, go back to base camp, gather what you need, and proceed. So it's a lot of back and forth, and don't give up, right?
Is it fair to say that your friend made you a better writer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No question.
So what you
first my sister.
Yeah.
And then, but my sister wasn't that nice about it. She's very nice now. But back in the day, she was like, I don't know. Yeah, my friend definitely made me a better writer. Yeah, so just, maybe resilience, getting back up off the floor when you've overestimated your...
And from what you've said, it sounds like that's happened time and time again.
What
I love about this is, the long game of resilience as well, Matt, and that it didn't stop you. The next time you had a big idea, you still did it anyway. And maybe you got pulled back to base camp, but you still did it again. And so that's one of my hypotheses of what I think really distinguishes great leaders from the rest are they're going to still experience self-doubt, however it shows up for them, but they don't let it stop them. They lead anyway. with confidence.
Yeah, I think that is a huge key, right? Whether you're talking about self-doubt, imposter syndrome, a big key word right now is anxiety.
Right. You don't turn into paralysis, right?
The key, and there was a book that came out when? The 80s, maybe? Nobody do math, okay, about the time frames I'm talking about. Maybe early 90s. A book came out and the title, and it's pure genius when you can find the title that really, really, you almost don't even need to buy the book, because it's like a bumper sticker, and the book was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I did buy the book and I did read the book. And I think one of the things I often hear from my clients and from people all around is, I'm waiting to not feel so scared. And it's like, luck with that. You're never going to not feel scared. You're just not. I think the key is to get used to feeling scared. Was it Eleanor Roosevelt said, do something that scares you every day? I love that, because I
Brilliant.
think that's exactly right. You just build the muscle. But I also think there's a very interesting distinction. And Scott, my husband, heard this guy on a golf podcast, okay? And he sent it to me. He's like, oh, I heard this thing on a golf podcast. And I'm like, please, God, don't make me listen to anything about golf. I love him. He can play as much as he wants. He's not allowed to talk about it. Anyway, this is the book.
Wow.
And this guy's very interesting. And it's about performance psychology.
Absolutely. It reminds me of the iceberg metaphor, right? Beneath the surface.
And he makes distinctions I really had never heard before. So thank you for making me listen to a golf podcast. But he makes a distinction between nerves, performance nerves, like the way you get like, okay, big tournament, high stakes, and anxiety. And I think people collapse those two things, especially kids today. They're like, I have such anxiety. It's like, no, you have nerves. Nerves are normal.
Right.
And the more you learn to function with nerves, the more you just keep doing stuff that's hard and proving to yourself you can do hard things.
I love that.
Anxiety is, when you cease to be able to function. And I think when you let nerves get the better of you, which happens, it does happen, but that doesn't mean you don't have to try again.
I agree with that.
Right?
Yeah. And I think self-doubt's very similar, right? You keep going, you don't let it stop you. But when you get into full-blown imposter syndrome, I think that's when it becomes systemic.
When you cease to function.
You cease to function because you're like, it's actually altering your choices.
Right. From a coaching standpoint, it's like the difference between when you're working with a client as a coach and they say, I think I have imposter syndrome, to me, it's like, welcome to the club, right? Who doesn't? And honestly, the question is it keeping you from actually doing what you need to do to get where you want to go? And if the answer is yes, then then I think that's where you go work with a therapist.
Absolutely.
And get to the deep-seated worthiness.
Do you see trends today with clients around, you mentioned anxiety, sort of the new buzzword. Are you noticing self-doubt show up in different ways?
To me, the anxiety trend is with the youngers. the teens, the early 20s. And maybe it's just in the media, because honestly, the teens, early 20s people I know, well, they're figuring it out. Was I anxious at that age? Yeah. Who wasn't? Right? You have your whole life ahead of you. And your job is to make the best of it? That's terrifying. Right? I mean, one of the great things about being my age now is everything from here on out is kind of bonus. Right? I mean,
Way to look at it. Yeah.
not that I'm not going to try to do cool things and do stuff that scares me. I am, but I don't really feel like I have anything left to prove to myself. But when you're late teens, early 20s, that's all you have to do is to prove yourself to yourself. What's not to be anxious about?
Yeah. And social media doesn't help that.
No, and I think the news telling kids that they're really anxious is just like, well, crap. Maybe I should be anxious. I don't feel that anxious. Maybe I should. Everybody else seems to be. I don't know. So maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah.
What are the trends among leaders that I'm seeing? Honestly, the sheer complexity. The complexity of being a business leader. I've just seen it over the 35 years I've been working with people in business. It just requires so much more time for all the input of all the things. I mean, think about it. And I think you worked with the same company, right? Health insurance. Health insurance.
A lot going on right now.
And in particular, mental health insurance. And the sheer IQ and EQ, the IQ to deal with all the strategy and the business issues and the volume of data and managing the data and interpreting the meaning of the data. So just that, it's like head exploding emoji, right? And now you're also leading all these people in a very high pressure environment. And then you're seeing your industry in the media every 25 seconds, right? New story shows up.
Managing that complexity, I'm sure there's some self-doubt. I've also noticed a trend on, while technology has been great in bringing in a lot of different, aspects of data, it adds to the amount of data, and that adds to the overwhelm. Right?
Oh, and we thought it would be a good idea to use this brand new cool bells and whistles platform, in 2017, right? 2017, it was the best thing going. Well, now there's a whole new product that can do this, all this other cool stuff. Don't get me started. But then, we need to migrate all the stuff in here up to here, which is just like, and you're like, the IT people can do that. Well, no, they cannot, because they don't know what all the different data sets are for and what they mean. So all the meaning behind all the data, I have a very good friend right now who's working in data protection. And all the angles that need to be looked at. And at first it looks really simple. It's anything but simple. I think I don't think actually that our brains, that our collective IQ is growing fast enough to, I was going to say, comfortably manage the complexity.
Yeah.
Forget comfortably, just simply manage the complexity.
So how do we, as a collective, work to normalize this idea that self-doubt is going to persist to help people get comfortable with failing fast as they work with this complexity?
Well, I remember saying this to a client. It was a really long time ago. And then we worked together for about 9 months. And when we were kind of doing our conclusion, she said, when we first started working together, you said, the first thing we're going to need to do here is have you get more comfortable with being really uncomfortable. She had really, really big goals. And she said, when you said that, and I remember we were on Skype. Remember Skype? She was one of the first people I did this video thing with. I saw her like recoil when I said that. And she said, I didn't like that. And I almost didn't come back for the next session. And she said, of all the things we've done, I think that's the biggest accomplishment, is that I am now more comfortable, not very comfortable, but more comfortable with being really uncomfortable. And I can see how to get what I want, to get where I'm going, it's probably going to be really uncomfortable the whole way.
So good. Yeah, that's a great example, because I think her even coming back is a testament to like, okay, I'm going to do this because that made me uncomfortable, but I'm going to show up again. Right.
It's not unlike your first day of a 10-day hike. You're going to get blisters. They hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you bring Band-Aids and moleskin.
Yeah.
You got to buy a hike.
Because somehow this message, I think, has just gotten into our society, and maybe it's social media partially hasn't helped it, but where we suddenly feel like we have to be 100% sure and confident to do anything. And if that was the case, I would not be doing this podcast right now, because I was waiting to be right for the last 2-3 years. I was waiting to be ready. And finally, after having and I'm hoping that through these conversations with people like you and people hearing the stories, that we can just like normalizing, like you said, it's not anxiety, it's just nervousness. We can normalize nervousness. I'd like to, look at normalizing self-doubt and help people see that it's actually part of the path. It's not a separate path or adjacent to it. It's part of the process. And that's how we build resilience. And that's how we learn and grow as human beings. And I think that in the corporate world, at least from the leaders I've been working with and what I've experienced in the corporate world, is there's an opportunity to really not just normalize this, but help them really see that by being vulnerable and authentic about where maybe you have doubt, and sharing it in the right context, in the right way, I will say, because not all C-suite leaders can come out and say, hey, I don't know about this decision. It's not always contextually appropriate. However, there's an opportunity through authenticity and this emotional intelligence to actually open the bridge, to have greater conversations and normalize it so that people can actually probably get further faster within these corporations. So with that, what is going on right now in your life and at Blanchard that listeners of this podcast may be interested in? I know you have a great training program for coaches.
Blanchard Leadership Certification. In fact, we just finished a cohort and I just read the final projects. You know what I love? It's a 15-week course. And you have, 18, 20 people, whatever, go through the same 15-week course. And then you look at their reflection on what they're taking away from it, it's all over the map. It's for experienced coaches. Do the coaches have to be certified? No, that's always the question. But they do need to have actual coaching experience. It's 40 hours. It's a lot. It's more continuing education credits than an ICF certified coach needs, because you actually only need 37. I just got called out on the 37 credits, because 3 of your continuing education credits for ICF need to be ethics, which it's ambitious. It's an ambitious course. And you were in the pilot, right?
I speak highly of it. I think a lot of the tools, of course, the standard for Blanchard is situational leadership, but I refer to it a lot. But the trust model and the change model are really impactful. And I've studied a lot of change management, Cotter, Pro-C, and I really like the way that you have blended it together, because a lot of those models take into account human behavior, but they don't always take into account people needs. And so I really like that your program does that. So that's definitely something exciting.
That is exciting. It is exciting. And we have a new cohort starting in August. We were going to do one this spring, and then, I don't know, bunch of reasons we moved it to August.
Okay. So I'll drop a link below for those listening or watching. And is there anything else that you'd like to leave the audience with?
I was thinking about this last night, and I was like, I know the topic is the unworthy leader, but I think of myself as an accidental leader. It never crossed my mind to question whether or not I should lead something, because I was just moving towards something I wanted to do, and I needed people to help me do it. So I was de facto led the way to do that thing that either I wanted to do or I needed to do. And what I see a lot in people is they see something they want to do or need to do, but then question if they should lead others. And it's like, it's a fair question, but, to me, it's, if not you, who? If not now, when? Will somebody else do that thing? Maybe. Maybe not. So, who is to decide who is to lead?
Very true. Yeah.
God is not going to reach down from the heavens and appoint you with his finger.
Yeah. What I'm hearing it quickly, I don't want to interrupt you, but a distinction in what you're saying is that back to, what you had described earlier, is that you're focused on the impact and the outcome. So I just know I need to do this thing. Whereas I'm hearing potentially that people that get steered in the other direction and sort of fall into this, how am I going to do this? And they're making it all about them. And they may not be doing it intentionally to be selfish, but they're making it about them. And instead of realizing that they can be creative to find the tools, knowledge, and skills that they need, and resources, help to go do it.
That is so right. You nailed it, Kendra. It's like, it's not about you.
It isn't.
It's about the thing that needs doing. Right. So I led first and then tried to get better at it, because I wasn't great at it.
Well, and that's a great segue and strategy because, I'm not a huge fan of the fake it till you make it terminology. I understand the value of it and why coaches will use it or people will say it. But I think at the end of the day, depending on where you are on this self-doubt spectrum, it can actually undermine what you're actually trying to do because then you still feel like a fake, right? You kind of know that you're kind of telling yourself the story instead of just saying, you know what? I have some doubts. Here are the things I need to maybe overcome these doubts. Now let's go do it. And I think that that's something that's a little pervasive. So thank you for sharing those nuggets of wisdom with us. That's very valuable. I always appreciate time
I
with
have
you.
the scars. I'm not saying it hasn't been painful. There hasn't been some suffering, you know.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I wanted to have you. I mean, I have some core tenets for this program that are about how I want to behave and show up and what I want from the guests on this podcast. And one of them is authenticity, emotional intelligence, and then also how can we show resilience through being vulnerable and sharing, areas and moments of growth. And you've really exhibited all of those today. And I just very grateful to have this time with you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I love
Absolutely.
these topics. Who doesn't love talking about themselves? And you're good to be here.
A sincere thank you for tuning into the Unworthy Leader podcast, where we embrace imperfection as the leadership strength. I hope today's conversation challenged and inspired you to lead authentically. Together, we're breaking down imposter syndrome and redefining leadership through vulnerability and courage. For show notes, bonus content, and leadership resources, please visit theunworthyleaderpodcast.com. You can follow us on YouTube at The Unworthy Leader Podcast, LinkedIn at Kendra Dahlstrom. Until next time, lead authentically.